in the vast wilderness of 1847 Montana Territory, where survival meant facing nature's deadliest predators with nothing but courage and quick thinking, one woman's split-second decision to save a stranger's life would forever change the destiny of an entire Cherokee tribe. What started as a routine hunting expedition would become a legendary tale of bravery, honor, and an unbreakable bond that defied all cultural boundaries. This is the extraordinary true story of how Sarah McKenna, a frontier woman armed only with her father's rifle and unwavering determination, rescued a young Cherokee brave from certain death, and how that single act of heroism earned her something no white woman had ever received: the sworn allegiance of an entire Native American tribe. The events that unfolded over those fateful 3 days in the Rocky Mountain wilderness would challenge everything both cultures believed about trust, loyalty, and the power of human compassion to bridge even the deepest divides. Sarah McKenna wiped the sweat from her brow as she carefully tracked the elk prints through the dense Montana wilderness. The morning sun filtered through the towering pine trees, casting dancing shadows across the forest floor. At 24, Sarah had spent most of her life in these mountains, learning to hunt and survive from her father before his death 2 winters ago. Now, with her small homestead, depending on her skills, she ventured deeper into the territory than most settlers dare to go. The elk trail led her through a narrow canyon where the walls rose high on either side, creating an echo chamber that amplified every sound. Sarah moved silently, her father's Winchester rifle ready in her hands. She had been tracking this particular elk for 3 days, and the meat would feed her through the harsh Montana winter that was approaching fast. As she rounded a bend in the canyon, a sound froze her blood. It was not the gentle snapping of twigs under hooves or the rustle of leaves in the wind. It was a deep, guttural roar that seemed to shake the very rocks around her. Sarah's heart pounded as she recognized the sound immediately: a grizzly bear, and an angry one at that. Moving carefully toward the source of the noise, Sarah climbed up a small ridge that gave her a view of the canyon floor below. What she saw made her stomach drop. A massive grizzly bear, easily 8 feet tall when standing on its hind legs, was circling a young Native American man who appeared to be trapped against a rock wall. The man held a broken spear in one hand and a knife in the other, but Sarah could see from his posture that he was injured. The bear had clearly been stalking its prey and was now preparing for the final attack. The young man, who could not have been more than 18 years old, showed no fear despite his desperate situation. His long black hair was tied back with leather strips, and his buckskin clothing marked him as Cherokee. Sarah had seen Cherokee people trading in the nearest town, though interactions between the settlers and the tribe were generally cautious and limited. Sarah's mind raced as she assessed the situation. She was too far away to help with her knife, and shooting from this distance would be risky. If she missed, she might hit the young man instead of the bear. If she wounded the bear without killing it, the animal would become even more dangerous and unpredictable. But if she did nothing, she would watch an innocent person die. The grizzly reared up on its hind legs, preparing to charge. Sarah made her decision in that instant. She had only one shot to make this work, and it had to be perfect. Taking a deep breath to steady her nerves, she aimed carefully for the bear's chest, knowing that a head shot might not penetrate the thick skull bone. The rifle's crack echoed through the canyon like thunder. The grizzly stumbled backward, roaring in pain and fury. Sarah's shot had found its mark, but the massive animal was not down yet. The bear turned its attention towards Sarah's position, its small eyes filled with rage as it tried to locate the source of its pain. Without hesitation, Sarah worked the rifle's lever action, chambering another round. The young Cherokee man, seeing his opportunity, drove his knife into the bear's side. This distraction gave Sarah the opening she needed for her second shot. This time, she aimed for the heart, and the powerful Winchester round dropped the grizzly where it stood. The silence that followed was almost as deafening as the gunshots had been. Sarah's ears rang as she carefully made her way down the ridge toward the canyon floor. The young Cherokee man stood over the dead bear, breathing heavily and clutching his wounded shoulder. Blood seeped through his buckskin shirt, and Sarah could see that his left leg was also injured. As she approached, the young man raised his knife defensively, unsure of her intentions. Sarah stopped about 10 feet away and slowly lowered her rifle to the ground, raising her hands to show she meant no harm. She pointed to his wounds and then to herself, indicating her desire to help. The young man studied her face carefully. Sarah had learned a few Cherokee words from traders over the years, though her pronunciation was far from perfect. She attempted to say friend in Cherokee, though she was not sure she got it right. The young man's eyes widened slightly in surprise at her attempt to speak his language. Slowly, he lowered his knife and nodded. Sarah approached cautiously and examined his wounds. The shoulder injury was deep but clean, likely from the bear's claws. His leg appeared to be sprained rather than broken, probably from a fall while trying to escape the bear. Sarah tore strips from her own shirt to create makeshift bandages, cleaning the wounds with water from her canteen. As she worked, the young man spoke softly in Cherokee. Though Sarah could not understand most of his words, his tone conveyed gratitude. He winced as she cleaned the shoulder wound, but did not complain. When she finished bandaging his injuries, he attempted to stand, but immediately sat back down, clearly dizzy from blood loss. Sarah realized that the young man was in no condition to travel alone. The sun was already beginning to set, and the temperature would drop significantly once darkness fell. She made a decision that would have seemed unthinkable to most frontier settlers. She would help this Cherokee brave reach safety, even if it meant venturing deep into territory controlled by his tribe. Using gestures and the few Cherokee words she knew, Sarah managed to communicate that she would help him reach his people. The young man seemed hesitant at first, perhaps wondering if this was some kind of trap. But Sarah's actions had already demonstrated her good intentions, and he was in no position to refuse help. Together, they managed to construct a simple travois using branches and Sarah's rope. She helped the wounded brave onto the makeshift stretcher and began the slow journey toward Cherokee territory. As they traveled, the young man told her his name was Akando, which he explained meant ambush in Cherokee. Sarah shared her own name, and Akando repeated it several times, seeming to commit it to memory. The journey was difficult and dangerous. Sarah had to navigate unfamiliar terrain while pulling the travois and remaining alert for other predators. Several times, they heard wolves howling in the distance, and Sarah kept her rifle ready. Akando, despite his injuries, remained alert and pointed out potential dangers or easier paths through the wilderness. As they traveled through the night, Sarah learned more about her unexpected companion. Through a combination of gestures, broken English, and simple Cherokee words, Akando explained that he had been on a hunting expedition when he encountered the Grizzly. He had been tracking the same elk that Sarah had been following, and their paths had crossed at the worst possible moment. By dawn, they had covered several miles, but Sarah was exhausted from pulling the travois through difficult terrain. Akando insisted that she rest, and they found shelter under a large overhang of rock. As Sarah dozed fitfully, Akando kept watch despite his injuries, demonstrating the same protective instincts that Sarah had shown toward him. When Sarah awoke several hours later, Akando was heating water over a small fire he had managed to build. He had found edible plants and roots during her rest, and they shared a simple meal. Sarah was impressed by his knowledge of the wilderness and his ability to find sustenance even while injured. As they prepared to continue their journey, Sarah noticed that Akando was studying her with a thoughtful expression. He spoke several sentences in Cherokee, and though she could not understand the words, his tone suggested he was making some kind of promise or declaration. He then removed a small carved stone pendant from around his neck and offered it to Sarah. The pendant was beautifully crafted, depicting a bear and an eagle intertwined. Akando gestured to indicate that the bear represented strength and the eagle represented courage. Sarah understood that this was his way of honoring her bravery in rescuing him from the grizzly. She accepted the pendant gratefully, touched by the gesture. The second day of travel brought them closer to Cherokee territory. Sarah could see smoke from cooking fires in the distance, indicating that they were approaching Akando's village. However, she also realized that her presence might not be welcomed by the Cherokee people. Relations between settlers and Native Americans were often tense, and a white woman entering Cherokee territory uninvited could be seen as a threat. Akando seemed to understand her concern. He spoke earnestly to her, and though she could not understand all his words, his meaning was clear. He would protect her just as she had protected him. Sarah felt a warmth in her chest at this assurance, recognizing that she had found not just someone to help, but a true friend. As evening approached on the second day, they finally saw the Cherokee village in the distance. Smoke rose from dozens of lodge fires, and Sarah could see people moving between the structures. Her heart raced as she realized she was about to enter a world completely foreign to her own. A Kando called out in Cherokee, and soon several young men came running toward them. When they saw a Kando injured on the travois and Sarah standing beside him with a rifle, they immediately became defensive, raising their own weapons. A Kando spoke quickly and urgently to them, gesturing toward Sarah and apparently explaining what had happened. Sarah stood very still, her hands visible and away from her rifle, as the Cherokee men discussed the situation. She could feel their eyes studying her, trying to determine if she posed a threat. Finally, one of the men, who appeared to be slightly older than the others, approached her and spoke in heavily accented English. "You help a Kando?" he asked, pointing to the wounded brave. "Yes," Sarah replied simply. "Grizzly bear. I shot it." The man translated for the others, and Sarah saw their expressions change from suspicion to surprise. A Kando spoke again, more insistently this time, and Sarah heard him say her name several times. Whatever he was telling them, it seemed to be having an effect. The older Cherokee man turned back to Sarah. "I am Sequoia," he said. "A Kando says you save his life. You kill Great Bear with rifle." "The bear was going to kill him," Sarah said. "I couldn't let that happen." Sequoia studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You come to village. Chief will want to hear this story." As they entered the Cherokee village, Sarah found herself surrounded by curious faces. Children peered out from behind their mothers' skirts, and elderly men and women watched from the doorways of their homes. Sarah had never felt more out of place, but a Kando's reassuring presence beside her gave her courage. The village was larger than Sarah had expected, with dozens of well-constructed lodges arranged in a circular pattern around a central fire pit. The Cherokee people had clearly been living in this area for a long time, as evidenced by the well-worn path between buildings and the carefully tended gardens visible throughout the village. Sequoia led them to the largest lodge in the center of the village, where an elderly Cherokee man emerged to meet them. This man carried himself with obvious authority and dignity, and Sarah immediately recognized him as the chief. His weathered face bore the marks of many years and much wisdom, and his dark eyes seemed to see everything. A Kando spoke to the chief in rapid Cherokee, gesturing frequently towards Sarah and acting out parts of their encounter with the grizzly bear. The chief listened intently, occasionally asking questions that a Kando answered with obvious respect and honesty. When a Kando finished his account, the chief approached Sarah. Though he was not a large man physically, his presence was commanding, and Sarah felt the weight of his authority. He spoke to her in English that was more fluent than Sequoia's. "I am Chief Atohi," he said formally. "A Kando tells me you risked your life to save his. He says you could have stayed hidden but chose to fight the Great Bear to protect someone you did not know." "He needed help," Sarah replied. "I did what anyone would do." Chief Atohi shook his head. "No, not anyone. Many would have stayed hidden. Many would have thought only of their own safety. You chose differently." The chief was quiet for a long moment, studying Sarah's face as if trying to read her very soul. Finally, he spoke again. "You will stay in our village tonight. Tomorrow, we will speak more of this. A Kando's mother will tend to his wounds, and you will be given food and shelter." As Sarah was led to a guest lodge, she reflected on the extraordinary events of the past 2 days. She had entered the wilderness hunting elk and found herself in the middle of a Cherokee village, having formed an unexpected friendship with a young brave she had saved from certain death. She had no way of knowing that the next day would bring even more remarkable developments, or that her act of courage would soon earn her something unprecedented in the history of Cherokee settler relations. Sarah woke before dawn to the sound of voices outside her lodge. The Cherokee words were spoken in hushed tones, but she could detect an undercurrent of urgency in the conversation. Through the gaps in the lodge walls, she could see several tribal members gathered around Chief Atohi, engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion. As the first light of morning filtered through the smoke hole above, an elderly Cherokee woman entered Sarah's lodge carrying a wooden bowl of warm stew and freshly baked cornbread. The woman, who had kind eyes and graying hair braided with colorful beads, smiled gently at Sarah and gestured for her to eat. Though they shared no common language, the woman's maternal warmth transcended words. After the meal, Sequoia appeared at the lodge entrance. His expression was more serious than it had been the previous evening, and Sarah sensed that something significant was about to happen. "Chief Atohi calls for you," Sequoia said formally. "The council gathers to hear your story and decide your fate." Sarah's heart skipped a beat at the mention of her fate. She had hoped that helping Akando would earn her safe passage back to her homestead, but it seemed the situation was more complex than she had anticipated. She followed Sequoia through the village, noting that more people were awake and active than would normally be expected at such an early hour. The council lodge was the largest structure in the village, capable of holding perhaps 50 people. As Sarah entered, she saw that it was nearly full. Cherokee men and women of all ages sat in a large circle, with Chief Atohi positioned at the head. Akando sat near the chief, his shoulder properly bandaged and his color much improved from the previous day. Chief Atohi gestured for Sarah to take a place in the center of the circle. As she sat down on the woven mat provided for her, she felt the weight of dozens of eyes studying her every movement. The atmosphere was solemn and formal, unlike anything Sarah had experienced in her frontier life. The chief began to speak in Cherokee, his voice carrying the authority of his position and the wisdom of his years. Though Sarah could not understand his words, she could tell he was recounting the events that had brought her to their village. Periodically, he would pause and look at her, as if ensuring she understood the gravity of the situation. After several minutes of the chief's narration, an elderly Cherokee woman stood and spoke passionately. Her tone suggested disagreement or concern, and Sarah noticed several other tribal members nodding in agreement with whatever she was saying. Sequoia leaned over and whispered a translation to Sarah. "She says you're a white woman, and white people cannot be trusted. She says maybe you help Akando only to gain entrance to our village. She says maybe you're a spy for soldiers." Sarah's stomach dropped at this accusation. She had not considered that her rescue of Akando might be viewed with suspicion rather than gratitude. The elderly woman continued speaking, and Sarah could see that her words were having an effect on some of the council members. When the woman finished, Akando stood slowly, favoring his injured leg. He spoke with obvious passion, gesturing frequently towards Sarah and occasionally touching the bandaged wound she had treated. His voice grew stronger as he continued, and Sarah could see that he was making an impassioned defense of her character. Another council member, a middle-aged man with scars on his arms that suggested he was a warrior, stood to speak. His tone was questioning rather than accusatory, and Sequoia translated his main points. He asked how we know you speak truth about the bear. He says maybe you wounded Akando yourself, and make up story about bear to hide your crime. Before Sarah could respond, Akando pulled out his knife and pointed to the blade. Sarah realized he was showing the council that his knife bore the blood and fur of the grizzly bear. He then gestured towards Sarah's rifle and spoke rapidly in Cherokee. "Akando says your rifle shot bear twice," Sequoia translated. "He says he felt the bullets pass close to his head, but you never missed your target. He says only someone trying to save him would take such risks with the shots." The council murmured at this revelation. Sarah understood that Akando was describing the precision required to shoot the grizzly without hitting him, especially from the distance she had been at when she took her first shot. It was indeed evidence of her intention to save rather than harm him. Chief Atohi raised his hand for silence and spoke directly to Sarah in English. "Tell the council in your own words what happened when you found Akando and the bear." Sarah took a deep breath and began to recount the events. She described tracking the elk, hearing the bear's roar, and seeing Akando trapped against the rock wall. She explained her decision to shoot despite the risks, and her subsequent care of Akando's wounds. As she spoke, she noticed that several council members were listening intently, and the atmosphere in the lodge seemed to shift slightly. When Sarah finished her account, an older Cherokee man with a deeply lined face stood and spoke at length. His tone was thoughtful rather than argumentative, and Sarah could tell he was weighing different perspectives. Sequoia provided a summary of his words. "He says your story matches what Akando tells us. He says the wounds on Akando are from bear claws, not from bullets or knives. He says you brought Akando home when you could have left him to die or taken him prisoner. The debate continued for over an hour, with various council members expressing their opinions. Some remained suspicious of Sarah's motives, while others seemed convinced of her sincerity. Sarah noticed that the younger members of the tribe were generally more supportive of her, while some of the older members remained skeptical. Finally, Chief Atohi called for silence again. He stood and walked slowly around the circle, making eye contact with each council member as he spoke. His words were measured and deliberate, and Sarah could sense that he was building toward some kind of conclusion. "The council must decide," Chief Atohi said, switching to English so Sarah could understand. "We have heard all voices. We have considered all evidence. Now we must choose how to respond to this white woman who claims to have saved the life of our young warrior." The chief paused and looked directly at Sarah. "In our tradition, when someone saves the life of a Cherokee, they create a bond that cannot be broken. This bond carries obligations on both sides. The saved person owes their life to their rescuer. The rescuer becomes responsible for the welfare of the one they saved." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she began to understand the significance of what the chief was saying. This was not simply a matter of thanking her for helping Akando and sending her on her way. The Cherokee people had specific cultural protocols for dealing with life-saving acts, protocols that she had inadvertently triggered. "If the council decides that you truly saved Akando's life," Chief Atohi continued, "then you become bound to our tribe in a way that few outsiders have ever experienced. You would become what we call a life keeper, someone who has proven their courage and compassion in the most extreme circumstances." The chief returned to his seat and spoke again in Cherokee. Sarah could tell he was calling for a formal vote. One by one, each council member stood and spoke briefly before sitting down. Some votes were clearly in her favor, while others seemed less certain. When all the council members had voted, Chief Atohi stood once more. The lodge fell completely silent as everyone waited for his announcement. "The council has decided," he said solemnly. "By a count of 31 to 17, we find that Sarah McKenna did indeed save the life of Akando. We find that she risked her own life to protect someone she did not know. We find that her actions show the courage and honor that our people respect above all else." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she sensed that the chief was not finished. However, Chief Atohi continued, "This decision brings consequences that you may not have expected. According to our ancient laws, you are now bound to Akando as his lifekeeper, and he is bound to you as life debt. This is not something that can be easily undone." The chief gestured to Akando, who stood and walked to the center of the circle beside Sarah. He spoke in Cherokee, and Sequoia translated. "Akando says he owes you his life. He says he will serve you faithfully until his debt is repaid. He says he will protect you as you protected him." Sarah was stunned by this turn of events. She had expected gratitude, perhaps a gift or ceremonial recognition. She had not expected to find herself bound to a young Cherokee brave by ancient tribal laws that she did not fully understand. Chief Atohi seemed to recognize her confusion. "This is not slavery," he explained. "This is sacred bond. Akando chooses to honor the life debt because our traditions demand it. But the bond works both ways. You are now responsible for Akando's welfare, just as he is responsible for yours." An elderly Cherokee woman, different from the one who had spoken against Sarah earlier, stood and addressed the chief. Her words were formal and ritualistic, and Sarah could tell that something ceremonial was about to take place. She asked permission to perform the life bond ceremony, Sequoia translated. "If you agree to accept this bond, there will be ritual to make it official in the eyes of our people." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. She had come to the Cherokee village expecting to deliver Akando safely to his people and then return to her homestead. Now she was being asked to enter into some kind of sacred bond that would tie her to the Cherokee tribe indefinitely. "What does this mean for me?" Sarah asked Chief Atohi. "Can I return my home? Can I live my life as I did before?" The chief considered her questions carefully. "The life bond does not make you prisoner," he said. "You are free to live where you choose. But Akando will be compelled by honor and tradition to ensure your safety. If you're in danger, he must help you. If you need assistance, he must provide it." Chief Atohi paused and looked around the circle of council members. "There is something else," he said. "The council has decided that your actions deserve recognition beyond the life bond with Akando. we have decided to offer you something that has never been offered to an outsider before." The chief's words created a stir among the council members. Sarah could see surprise and even shock on some faces, suggesting that whatever the chief was about to propose had not been discussed beforehand. "We offer you honorary membership in our tribe," Chief Atohi announced. "Not full membership, which would require you to live among us permanently, but honored status that would give you the protection and support of our people wherever you go." The silence that followed this announcement was deafening. Sarah could see that some council members were pleased by this development, while others appeared concerned or even opposed. It was clear that the chief's proposal was unprecedented and controversial. Akando spoke quietly in Cherokee, and Sarah could tell he was expressing gratitude for the honor being offered to her. Other council members began to murmur among themselves, and Sarah sensed that a new debate was beginning. "I need time to think about this," Sarah said. "This is all very unexpected. Yesterday, I was hunting elk, and today you're offering me membership in your tribe. I need to understand what this would mean for my life." Chief Atohi nodded approvingly. "Wisdom speaks through you," he said. "Such decisions should not be made quickly. You will stay with us tonight again. Tomorrow we will speak more of this, and you will give us your answer." As the council began to disperse, Akando approached Sarah. His English was limited, but he managed to convey his feelings about what had transpired. "You saved me," he said simply. "Now I save you always." Sarah looked into his earnest young face and realized that regardless of what she decided about the tribal membership, her life had already been permanently changed by her encounter with the grizzly bear. She had gained not just a friend, but a protector who would be bound to her by the most sacred laws of his people. That evening, as Sarah sat by the fire in her lodge, she reflected on the extraordinary day she had experienced. The Cherokee people had taken her simple act of courage and elevated it into something sacred and binding. She was beginning to understand that her rescue of Akando had set in motion events that would reverberate far beyond anything she could have imagined. Outside her lodge, she could hear the sounds of the Cherokee village settling down for the night. Children were being called in from their games, cooking fires were being banked, and the evening prayers were being spoken in a musical language that was becoming familiar to her ears. Sarah knew that tomorrow would bring another crucial decision point. The offer of honorary tribal membership was both an incredible honor and a tremendous responsibility. She would need to consider carefully whether she was prepared to accept the obligations that would come with such status. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah's last conscious thought was of Akando's words, "Now I save you always." She had no way of knowing how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how soon she would have cause to be grateful for the sacred bond that now tied her to the Cherokee people. The morning of the third day dawned gray and overcast, with heavy clouds promising rain before evening. Sarah woke to find that someone had left fresh clothes outside her lodge, a beautiful doeskin dress decorated with intricate beadwork and matching moccasins. The garments were clearly Cherokee-made and of exceptional quality, suggesting that they had been prepared specifically for some ceremonial purpose. As Sarah examined the clothing, she noticed that the beadwork incorporated symbols she had seen throughout the village: eagles, bears, and trees intertwined in patterns that seemed to tell story. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, with each bead precisely placed and the leather soft as silk from careful preparation. Sequoia appeared at her lodge entrance as she was admiring the dress. "Chief Atohi sends these for you," he said. "If you decide to accept the life bond and honorary membership, you will need proper clothing for the ceremony. And if I decide not to accept?" Sarah asked. Sequoia's expression grew serious. "Then you will leave our village with our gratitude and respect, but you will also leave with Akando. The life debt cannot be ignored, even if you refuse the tribal membership. Akando will follow you to ensure your safety, as tradition demands." Sarah realized that her decision was not simply between accepting or rejecting the Cherokee offer. Regardless of her choice about tribal membership, she would be taking Akando away from his family and village if she refused to stay. The weight of this responsibility was heavier than any burden she had ever carried. "May I speak with Chief Atohi before the ceremony?" Sarah asked. "He waits for you at the council lodge," Sequoia replied. "He hoped you would want to talk before making your decision." Sarah dressed in her own clothes and made her way through the village. The Cherokee people she passed greeted her with respectful nods, and several children smiled shyly at her from safe distances. She was struck by the warmth and dignity of these people, so different from the savage stereotypes she had grown up hearing from other settlers. Chief Atohi sat alone in the council lodge, tending a small fire and smoking a carved wooden pipe. He looked up as Sarah entered and gestured for her to sit across from him. "You have questions," he said without preamble. "This is good. Important decisions should be made with full understanding." "I need to know what honorary tribal membership actually means," Sarah said. "What would be expected of me? What obligations would I have?" The chief set down his pipe and considered his words carefully. "Honorary membership means you would be under the protection of our people wherever you go. If you were threatened or in danger, any Cherokee who learned of your situation would be obligated to help you. You could call upon our warriors, our healers, our hunters, and our craftspeople as if you were blood family. And what would I owe in return?" Sarah asked. "Loyalty," the chief replied simply. "If our people were in need and you had the ability to help, you would be expected to do so. If our village were attacked, you would be expected to fight alongside us or provide whatever assistance you could. You would represent our people in your dealings with other whites, and your actions would reflect on our entire tribe." Sarah absorbed this information, understanding that she would essentially become a bridge between two worlds that were often in conflict with each other. "There is something else you should know," Chief Atohi continued. "The offer we make to you has never been made before. There are some in our tribe who oppose it, who believe that no outsider should be granted such status. If you accept, you will face challenges not only from white settlers who may not understand your connection to us, but also from some Cherokee who will question whether you deserve such honor." The chief's honesty was both appreciated and sobering. Sarah was beginning to understand that accepting the Cherokee offer would place her in a unique and potentially dangerous position. "Why are you willing to make this offer?" Sarah asked. "Surely saving one person's life, even if it was brave, doesn't warrant such an unprecedented honor." Chief Atohi smiled for the first time since she had entered the lodge. "You asked the right questions," he said. "The answer is not simple. Yes, saving Akando's life was brave and worthy of honor. But there's more to consider." The chief rose and walked to the lodge entrance, gazing out at his village. "Our people live in a changing world," he said. "The white settlers grow more numerous each year. Some want only our land. Some want to destroy our way of life entirely. But a very few, show us that it is possible for our peoples to coexist with respect and understanding." He turned back to Sarah. "Your actions toward Akando show us that you see Cherokee people as human beings worthy of respect and protection. This is rare among your people. We believe that by honoring you, by creating a formal bond between you and our tribe, we create the possibility for better relations with other whites who might follow your example." Sarah was struck by the strategic wisdom of the chief's thinking. The Cherokee people were not simply rewarding her courage. They were making a calculated investment in the possibility of peaceful coexistence with white settlers. "There is also the matter of Akando himself," Chief Atohi continued. "He is not just any young warrior. He is my grandson, the son of my eldest daughter who died in childbirth. He is being groomed to lead this tribe someday. By saving his life, you have preserved not just one person, but potentially the future leadership of our people." This revelation stunned Sarah. She had rescued the chief's grandson and future tribal leader without knowing his significance. The political implications of her actions were far greater than she had realized. "Akando has spoken to me of his feelings about the life debt," the chief said. "He believes that his survival was guided by the spirits, and that you were sent to save him for a purpose. He sees your arrival in our village not as coincidence, but as destiny." Before Sarah could respond, Akando himself entered the lodge. His shoulder was healing well, and he moved with only a slight stiffness from his injuries. He approached Sarah and spoke in carefully pronounced English. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not because of life debt, but because you belong here now. You are brave like Cherokee warrior. You have good heart like Cherokee mother. You should be Cherokee sister." Sarah was touched by the young man's earnest words. She could see the hope in his eyes and realized that her decision would affect not just her own future, but the future of someone who had already been through so much. "If I accept the honorary membership," Sarah asked Chief Atohi, "can I still maintain my homestead? Can I live between both worlds?" "Yes," the chief replied. Honorary membership does not require you to live in our village permanently. You'll be free to come and go as you wish. But you would always have a place here, and you would always have the support of our people. Sarah stood and walked to the lodge entrance, looking out at the Cherokee village that had become unexpectedly familiar over the past few days. Children played in the open areas between lodges, women worked at various crafts, and men tended to weapons and tools. It was a community that functioned with remarkable harmony and efficiency. "I have another question," Sarah said, turning back to the chief. "What happens to Akando if I accept? Does the life debt continue, or would it be satisfied by my joining the tribe?" Chief Atohi and Akando exchanged a look, and Sarah could tell that this question had already been discussed between them. "The life debt would be transformed," the chief explained. "Instead of Akando being obligated to serve you as an individual, you would both be bound to serve the good of the tribe. The debt would become a partnership for the benefit of all Cherokee people." Akando nodded eagerly. "We work together," he said. "I teach you Cherokee ways. You teach me white ways. We help tribe understand both worlds." Sarah was beginning to see the full scope of what was being offered to her. She would not just be gaining honorary membership in the Cherokee tribe. She would be becoming part of a grand experiment in cross-cultural cooperation. The idea was both exciting and terrifying. "I need a few more minutes to think," Sarah said. "Of course," Chief Atohi replied. "Such decisions cannot be rushed." Sarah left the lodge and walked through the village, observing the life around her with new eyes. She watched an elderly Cherokee woman teaching a young girl to weave baskets, their fingers moving in practiced motions passed down through generations. She saw young warriors practicing with bows and arrows, their skills honed to a level that few white men could match. She observed the easy camaraderie between tribal members, the way they helped each other with tasks, and shared resources without apparent concern for individual ownership. At her own homestead, Sarah lived a solitary life, dependent only on herself for survival. Here, she was seeing a completely different way of life based on community support and shared responsibility. The contrast was striking, and she found herself wondering which approach led to greater security and happiness. As she walked, Sarah also considered the broader implications of her decision. If she accepted the Cherokee offer, she would become a living symbol of cooperation between two peoples who were often in conflict. White settlers might view her with suspicion or hostility for her association with Native Americans. Some Cherokee might always question whether she truly belonged among them. But there were also potential benefits beyond personal protection and support. Sarah realized that her unique position could allow her to serve as a mediator in disputes between settlers and Cherokee people. She could help prevent misunderstandings and conflicts that arose from mutual ignorance and prejudice. The more Sarah considered the offer, the more she appreciated the wisdom behind it. Chief Atohi was not making an emotional decision based solely on gratitude. He was making a strategic choice that could benefit both Cherokee people and white settlers who were willing to embrace peaceful coexistence. Sarah found herself standing at the edge of the village, looking out at the vast Montana wilderness that surrounded the Cherokee settlement. This land was big enough for multiple peoples to coexist, but only if they could find ways to understand and respect each other. She thought about her own homestead, isolated and vulnerable in the wilderness. She thought about the long, lonely winters and the constant struggle for survival. She thought about the fear she lived with every day, fear of predators, fear of accidents, fear of injury or illness with no one to help her. In contrast, the Cherokee village offered community, support, and protection. It offered the chance to be part of something larger than herself. It offered the opportunity to help bridge the gap between two worlds that desperately needed to find common ground. Sarah's decision crystallized in that moment. She would accept the Cherokee offer, not just for her own benefit, but because she believed it was the right thing to do for both peoples. She would become a living example of what was possible when courage and compassion replaced fear and prejudice. Walking back toward the council lodge, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had made her choice, and she was ready to face whatever challenges it might bring. Chief Atohi and Akando were waiting for her when she returned. Both men studied her face, and Sarah could tell that they already knew her decision from her expression. "I accept your offer," Sarah said formally. "I will become an honorary member of your tribe, and I will accept the life bond with the Kando. I promise to honor the obligations this brings, and to serve the good of your people to the best of my ability." Akando's face broke into a wide smile, and he spoke rapidly in Cherokee to his grandfather. Chief Atohi nodded solemnly, but Sarah could see approval and satisfaction in his eyes. "Then, we will hold the ceremony at sunset," the chief said. "You will need time to prepare, and the tribal elders will need time to gather the sacred items required for the ritual." As Sarah left the lodge to prepare for the ceremony that would change her life forever, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. 3 days ago, she had been a solitary white settler struggling to survive in the Montana wilderness. Tonight, she would become an honorary member of a Cherokee tribe, bound by sacred obligations to people she had never imagined she would call family. The rain that had been threatening all day finally began to fall, but Sarah noticed that the Cherokee people did not seem disturbed by it. Instead, several of them looked up at the sky with expressions of satisfaction, as if the rain were a good omen for the ceremony to come. As Sarah prepared to don the ceremonial clothing that had been made for her, she realized that she was not just changing clothes. She was preparing to step into a new identity that would honor both her own heritage and the heritage of the people who had chosen to accept her as one of their own. As the afternoon rain subsided and evening approached, the Cherokee village came alive with preparations for a ceremony unlike any in tribal memory. Sarah watched from her lodge as tribal members gathered materials and arranged the central fire area with meticulous care. The gravity of what was about to take place was evident in every action and gesture. The ceremonial dress fit Sarah perfectly, as if it had been made specifically for her measurements. The doeskin was soft and supple, decorated with intricate beadwork that told the story of courage in battle and protection of the innocent. As she examined the garments more closely, Sarah realized that the beadwork included symbols from both Cherokee and frontier traditions: an eagle soaring above a mountain cabin, a bear protecting both Cherokee and settler children, trees that provided shelter for all peoples. Sequoia arrived to escort Sarah to the ceremony as the sun began to set. "The dress was made by Akando's mother before she died," he explained. "She had visions of a white woman who would save her son and become part of our people." The tribal women finished the beadwork according to her designs. This revelation sent chills down Sarah's spine. The idea that Akando's mother had somehow foreseen these events years before they occurred was both mystical and deeply moving. Sarah felt the weight of destiny settling around her shoulders like a mantle. The central fire had been built higher than usual, its flames reaching toward the darkening sky. The entire tribe had gathered in a large circle around the fire, with the eldest members closest to the flames and the youngest at the outer edges. Sacred objects had been arranged around the fire: eagle feathers, carved stones, medicine bundles, and items that Sarah could not identify, but which clearly held deep spiritual significance. Chief Atohi stood on one side of the fire, dressed in elaborate ceremonial regalia that included a magnificent headdress of eagle feathers and intricate beadwork that covered his entire shirt and leggings. Akando stood beside him, also wearing ceremonial dress, though simpler than his grandfather's attire. Both men held themselves with solemn dignity befitting the historic nature of the occasion. As Sarah approached the fire, the assembled Cherokee people began to chant in low, musical voices. The words were ancient and sacred, and though Sarah could not understand them, she felt their power resonating through her body. The sound seemed to connect her not just to the people present, but to generations of Cherokee ancestors who had participated in similar ceremonies over countless years. Chief Atohi raised his hands, and the chanting ceased. The silence that followed was so complete that Sarah could hear the crackling of the fire and the gentle whisper of wind through the trees surrounding the village. When the chief spoke, his voice carried clearly to every person in the circle. "We gather tonight to witness something that has never been witnessed before in the history of our people," he announced in Cherokee, with Sequoia providing translation for Sarah. "We gather to welcome a white woman into our tribe as an honored member, and to formalize the sacred life debt between this woman and my grandson Akando. The chief began to recount the story of Sarah's rescue of Akando, but his telling was more detailed and ritualistic than the version Sarah had heard before. He described the grizzly bear as a test sent by the spirits, and Sarah's intervention as proof that the spirits had chosen her for a special purpose. He spoke of her willingness to risk her life for a stranger as evidence of the courage and compassion that the Cherokee people valued above all other virtues. As Chief Atohi spoke, several tribal elders stepped forward and began to arrange sacred objects in specific patterns around Sarah and Akando. Eagle feathers were placed to represent courage, bear claws to symbolize strength, and stones from the sacred mountains to signify permanence and endurance. Each object was accompanied by prayers and blessings spoken in the ancient Cherokee language. When the objects had been arranged, an elderly Cherokee woman whom Sarah had not seen before approached, carrying a bundle wrapped in beautifully decorated cloth. This woman moved with obvious authority and spiritual presence, and Sarah could tell that she held a position of great respect within the tribe. "This is Ayana, our oldest medicine woman," Sequoia whispered to Sarah. "She is keeper of the sacred ceremonies. She has agreed to perform the life bond ritual, which is very unusual since it has never been done with an outsider." Ayana unwrapped her bundle to reveal several items that appeared to be ancient and sacred. There was a curved knife with a bone handle covered in intricate carvings, a bowl made from what looked like polished stone, and several small pouches containing substances that Sarah could not identify. The medicine woman spoke to Sarah in Cherokee, and Chief Atohi translated. "She asks if you understand that the bonds being created tonight cannot be broken by any earthly power. She asks if you are prepared to honor these bonds, even if they require great sacrifice from you." Sarah looked around the circle at the dozens of faces watching her. These people were offering her something precious: acceptance, protection, and belonging. But they were also asking her to commit herself to obligations that would last for the rest of her life. "I understand," Sarah replied. "I am prepared to honor these bonds." Ayana nodded approvingly and began the ritual. She used the carved knife to make a small cut on Sarah's palm, then did the same to Akando. The cuts were shallow, meant to draw just a few drops of blood without causing injury. Sarah felt no pain, only a sense of solemnity and significance. The medicine woman caught the blood from both participants in the stone bowl, mixing it together while chanting in Cherokee. The mixture was then combined with various herbs and substances from her pouches, creating what Sarah assumed was some kind of sacred medicine. Chief Atohi began to speak again, but this time his words were clearly part of an ancient ritual formula. Sequoia translated as the chief spoke. "By the power of the sacred fire, by the wisdom of our ancestors, and by the blessing of the Great Spirit, we bind Sarah McKenna to Akando, son of Morning Star, in the sacred bond of life-death. What was given shall be returned. What was saved shall be protected. What was honored shall be blessed." Ayana stepped forward and painted symbols on Sarah's forehead using the mixture from the stone bowl. The substance felt cool against her skin and had a metallic, earthy smell. She then painted similar symbols on Akando's forehead, creating a visible connection between them. The ceremony continued with more chanting and the offering of sacred smoke from burning herbs. Sarah was instructed to breathe deeply of the smoke, which had a sweet, almost intoxicating aroma. As she inhaled, she felt a strange sense of lightness and connection to the people around her, as if barriers between herself and the Cherokee community were dissolving. When the smoking ritual was complete, Chief Atohi called Sarah and Akando to stand directly beside the fire. The heat was intense, and Sarah could feel sweat forming on her skin despite the cool evening air. The chief placed his hands on both of their shoulders and spoke the words that would change Sarah's legal and spiritual status forever. "Sarah McKenna, by the authority granted to me as chief of this Cherokee band, and in the presence of our entire community, I declare you to be an honorary member of our tribe. You are now Cherokee's sister, entitled to all the protection and support that we would give to one born among us. You are now bound to defend our people as we are bound to defend you." The chief turned to address the assembled tribe. "Let all Cherokee people know that Sarah McKenna is under our protection. Let any who would harm her know that they face the wrath of our entire tribe. Let all who meet her know that she speaks with the authority of Cherokee law and Cherokee honor. A great cheer rose from the assembled Cherokee people. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the display of acceptance and welcome. Children who had been watching shyly from the outer edges of the circle now came forward to touch her hands and speak words of greeting. Adult members of the tribe approached to offer formal words of welcome and to present her with small gifts, carved ornaments, beaded jewelry, and crafted items that she knew represented hours of skilled work. But the ceremony was not yet complete. Ayanna stepped forward again and spoke to the crowd in Cherokee. Her words created a stir of excitement and anticipation among the tribal members, and Sarah could tell that something especially significant was about to happen. The medicine woman says there is one more ritual, Sequoia explained. She says the spirits have told her that Sarah must receive a Cherokee name to complete her transformation. This is very rare. Usually, only people born into the tribe receive spirit names. Ayanna approached Sarah and placed her hands on Sarah's shoulders. The old woman's eyes seemed to look directly into Sarah's soul as she spoke in Cherokee. Her voice was strong despite her advanced age, and her words carried the authority of someone who had spent a lifetime interpreting the will of the spirits. She is looking for your spirit name, Sequoia translated. She says the spirits will tell her what you should be called among Cherokee people. For several long moments, Ayanna stood silent with her hands on Sarah's shoulders. The entire tribe waited in respectful silence for the medicine woman to receive her vision. Sarah felt a strange energy flowing between herself and the elderly Cherokee woman, as if Ayanna were reading something written in her very essence. Finally, Ayanna spoke. Her voice carried clearly across the firelit circle as she announced Sarah's Cherokee name. Galalahi Atzala, Ayanna said. Beloved Firebearer. Chief Atohi nodded approvingly. A good name, he said to Sarah. Galalahi means beloved, cherished, precious. Atzala means fire, but not just any fire, the sacred fire that brings light to darkness and warmth to the cold. You are Galalahi Atzala, the beloved one who brings the fire of courage and compassion wherever she goes. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as the significance of the name settled over her. These people had seen something in her that she had not seen in herself, a capacity to bring light and warmth to difficult situations, to bridge differences and create understanding where none had existed before. The final part of the ceremony involved the entire tribe chanting Sarah's new Cherokee name. The sound of dozens of voices speaking Galalahi Atzala in unison was deeply moving, and Sarah felt a profound sense of belonging that she had never experienced before in her life. As the formal ceremony concluded, the celebration began. Cherokee musicians brought out drums and flutes, and dancing began around the sacred fire. Sarah found herself swept into the festivities, learning simple dance steps from Cherokee women who laughed good-naturedly at her clumsy attempts to follow their graceful movements. Akando stayed close to Sarah throughout the evening, serving as her guide and interpreter as various tribal members approached to welcome her officially into their community. She was struck by the warmth and genuine acceptance she received from people who had been complete strangers just 3 days earlier. Late in the evening, as the celebration began to wind down, Chief Atohi approached Sarah with a final gift. It was a beautifully crafted medicine bundle, similar to the one she had seen the Cherokee people carrying. This contains sacred items that will protect you on your journey through life, he explained. Eagle feathers for courage, bear claws for strength, stones from our sacred mountain for wisdom, and herbs for healing. As long as you carry this bundle, you carry the protection of our ancestors and the blessing of our people. Sarah accepted the medicine bundle with deep gratitude, understanding that it represented not just physical protection, but spiritual connection to her new Cherokee family. As she prepared to retire to her lodge for the night, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary transformation she had undergone. She was no longer simply Sarah McKenna, frontier woman and lone homesteader. She was now Galalahi Atzala, beloved firebearer, honorary member of a Cherokee tribe, bound by sacred law to protect and serve people she had learned to love and respect. The ceremony had been beautiful and moving, but Sarah knew that the real test would come in the days and weeks ahead. She would need to prove herself worthy of the honors she had received, and she would need to find ways to live up to the hopes and expectations that the Cherokee people now held for her. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah's last thought was of the words Chief Atohi had spoken during the ceremony. What was given shall be returned. What was saved shall be protected. What was honored shall be blessed. She was beginning to understand that saving Akando's life had been only the beginning of a much larger journey that would define the rest of her days. The morning after the ceremony dawned clear and bright, as if the weather itself were celebrating the historic events of the previous evening. Sarah woke to find that her entire perspective on the world had shifted. She was no longer an outsider looking in at Cherokee life. She was now part of the community, bound by sacred ties that could never be severed. As she emerged from her lodge, wearing the Cherokee dress that had become her ceremonial garment, Sarah found the village bustling with activity. But this was not the usual daily routine of cooking, crafting, and tending to various tasks. Instead, tribal members were engaged in preparations that seemed both urgent and ceremonial in nature. Akando approached her with an expression that mixed excitement with solemnity. His English had improved noticeably over the past few days, as if his connection to Sarah had motivated him to master her language more completely. "Today is an important day," he said. "Grandfather receives message from other Cherokee bands. They come to see you, to see white woman who became Cherokee's sister." Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. "Other Cherokee bands? How many people are coming?" "Maybe 100, maybe more," Akando replied. "Cherokee people from many villages want to see the fire-bearer. They want to know if stories about you are true." Sequoia joined them and provided more details about what was happening. "Word of your ceremony has spread faster than wildfire," he explained. "Cherokee communities throughout this region are sending representatives to witness this unprecedented event. Some come out of curiosity, some out of skepticism, and some out of genuine interest in what this might mean for relations between Cherokee and white people." Sarah was beginning to understand that her acceptance into the tribe was not just a local matter. It was being seen as a potential model for Cherokee-white relations across a much broader area. The pressure of representing something larger than herself was both exciting and intimidating. Chief Atohi appeared and gestured for Sarah to join him in the council lodge. "We must prepare you for what is coming," he said seriously. "Not all Cherokee people will be as accepting as my band has been. Some will test you, some will challenge you, and some may try to prove that a white woman cannot truly understand Cherokee ways." The chief led Sarah to a seat near the fire and began what amounted to an intensive education in Cherokee customs, protocols, and expectations. He taught her proper greetings for different types of Cherokee leaders, explained the significance of various ceremonial objects and gestures, and helped her practice pronunciation of Cherokee phrases that would be essential for showing respect to visiting dignitaries. "Remember," Chief Atohi emphasized, "you are not just representing yourself today. You are representing the possibility that Cherokee and white people can coexist with mutual respect and understanding. Your words and actions will be studied and remembered by Cherokee leaders throughout this territory." As the morning progressed, the first groups of visiting Cherokee began to arrive. Sarah watched from the council lodge as impressive processions of mounted warriors, tribal elders, and community leaders made their way into the village. Each group was received with formal ceremony, and Sarah could see Chief Atohi greeting the visitors with the dignity and protocol appropriate to their status. The most impressive arrival was that of Chief Sequatchie, leader of the largest Cherokee band in the region. He rode at the head of a group of nearly 50 warriors, all mounted on superb horses and dressed in their finest regalia. Chief Sequatchie himself was a formidable figure, tall, broad-shouldered, and bearing himself with the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to command. "Chief Sequatchie is a powerful leader," Akando explained to Sarah as they watched the procession. "His band has more than 300 people. If he accepts you, all Cherokee in this territory will follow his example. If he rejects you..." Akando did not finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. By noon, nearly 200 Cherokee people from various bands had gathered in and around Chief Atohi's village. Temporary shelters had been erected to accommodate the visitors, and the entire area buzzed with conversation in Cherokee as people discussed the unprecedented gathering and its purpose. Sarah spent the early afternoon meeting with smaller groups of Cherokee leaders, each encounter serving as a kind of informal test of her understanding and acceptance of Cherokee ways. She was questioned about her motivations for saving Akando, her willingness to accept Cherokee responsibilities, and her understanding of what her honorary membership would mean for both Cherokee and white communities. Some of the visitors were clearly skeptical. An elderly Cherokee woman named Ayoka challenged Sarah directly about her commitment to Cherokee people. "White people make many promises," she said through an interpreter. "They promise friendship, then take our land. They promise peace, then bring soldiers. Why should we believe your promises will be different?" Sarah answered honestly. "I cannot speak for other white people," she said. "I can only speak for myself. I promise to honor the bonds that have been created between me and this tribe. I promise to use whatever influence I have to promote understanding between our peoples. But you are right to be cautious. Trust must be earned through actions, not just words." Ayoka studied Sarah's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Good answer," she said. "We will watch to see if your actions match your words." As afternoon turned toward evening, Chief Atohi announced that the formal assembly would begin. All the visiting Cherokee leaders were invited to participate in a grand council that would evaluate Sarah's honorary membership and decide whether other Cherokee bands would recognize and honor the bond created by Chief Atohi's people. The council lodge had been enlarged for the occasion by removing several wall sections and extending the roof with temporary supports. Nearly 100 Cherokee leaders took their places in the expanded circle, with Chief Sequatchie given the position of honor directly across from Chief Atohi. Sarah found herself in the center of the circle, with Akando seated beside her as her life bond partner. The weight of so many eyes studying her was almost overwhelming, but she drew strength from Akando's steady presence and from the memory of the sacred ceremony that had brought her to this moment. Chief Atohi rose and addressed the assembled leaders in formal Cherokee oratory. His speech was eloquent and passionate, recounting not just the story of Sarah's rescue of Akando, but placing that action within the broader context of Cherokee-white relations and the need for new models of cooperation and understanding. When Chief Atohi finished, Chief Sequatchie stood to respond. His voice was deep and commanding, and even though Sarah could not understand his Cherokee words, she could tell that he was speaking with both authority and careful consideration. Sequoia provided translation as Chief Sequatchie spoke. "He says the story of your courage is impressive," Sequoia whispered. "But he says courage alone does not make someone Cherokee. He says being Cherokee means understanding our history, our struggles, our hopes for the future. He asks whether a white woman can truly understand the Cherokee heart." Chief Sequatchie continued speaking, and Sarah could tell that he was building towards some kind of challenge or test. Other Cherokee leaders listened intently, and Sarah sensed that whatever Chief Sequatchie was proposing would be crucial to the outcome of the gathering. "He proposes a test," Sequoia translated. "He says you must demonstrate not just physical courage, but spiritual understanding. He says you must show that you can see the world through Cherokee eyes, not just white eyes." Chief Sequatchie gestured towards Sarah and spoke directly to her in accented but clear English. "Sarah McKenna, called Galalahi Atzala by these people, I challenge you to tell us what it means to be Cherokee. Not what you have been taught by Chief Atohi, but what you understand in your heart. Show us that you truly belong among us." The lodge fell completely silent as Sarah rose to respond to this challenge. She understood that this was the crucial moment. Everything depended on her ability to demonstrate genuine understanding of Cherokee identity and values, not just surface knowledge of customs and traditions. Sarah took a deep breath and began to speak, drawing not just on what she had learned over the past few days, but on what she had observed and felt during her time among Cherokee people. "To be Cherokee," she said slowly, "means to understand that individual strength comes from community support. I have seen how Cherokee people care for each other, how they share burdens and celebrate successes together. It means respecting the wisdom of elders while nurturing the potential of young people. I have watched Cherokee grandparents teaching children skills that have been passed down for generations, while also preparing them for a changing world." Sarah paused, making eye contact with Cherokee leaders around the circle. To be Cherokee means honoring the connection between human beings and the natural world. I have seen how Cherokee people take only what they need from the land, how they give thanks for what they receive, and how they consider the impact of their actions on future generations. Chief Sequatchie nodded slightly. encouraging Sarah to continue. To be Cherokee means having the courage to defend what is right, even when it is difficult or dangerous, Sarah went on. I have seen Cherokee people stand up for their beliefs and their community, even when faced with overwhelming odds. And to be Cherokee means understanding that true strength comes not from conquering others, but from building bridges of understanding and cooperation. Sarah's voice grew stronger as she continued. But perhaps most importantly, to be Cherokee means carrying the responsibility of representing your people in every action you take. I understand that as Galalahi Atsala, I am not just Sarah McKenna anymore. I am a symbol of what is possible when people choose cooperation over conflict, when they choose to see the humanity in those who are different from themselves. When Sarah finished speaking, the silence in the lodge was profound. Cherokee leaders looked at each other, communicating through subtle gestures and expressions that Sarah was only beginning to understand. Chief Sequatchie stood again and spoke in Cherokee for several minutes. His tone was thoughtful and measured, and Sarah could tell that he was carefully weighing what he had heard against his own expectations and standards. Finally, he turned to address Sarah directly. Galalahi Atsala, he said, using her Cherokee name, your words show understanding that goes beyond what can be taught in a few days. You speak truth about Cherokee ways, and you speak truth about Cherokee responsibilities. The chief paused dramatically, but understanding and living are different things. Words are easy, actions are hard. Therefore, I propose that this council accept your honorary membership, but with conditions. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she waited to hear what conditions Chief Sequatchie would impose. You will spend one full season living among Cherokee people, learning our ways completely, he announced. You will participate in our ceremonies, our hunts, our councils, and our daily life. If, after one full season, you still wish to maintain your Cherokee bonds, and if Cherokee leaders from all our bands agree that you have proven yourself worthy, then we will formally recognize your status and extend our protection and support to you wherever you go. Chief Sequatchie looked around the circle of Cherokee leaders. Do the representatives of all Cherokee bands agree to this proposal? One by one, the Cherokee leaders stood and spoke their agreement. Some spoke enthusiastically, others with reservation, but all agreed to accept Sarah's honorary membership with the condition that she prove herself worthy through extended participation in Cherokee life. When all the leaders had spoken, Chief Sequatchie made a final pronouncement that sent a thrill through the assembled crowd. Let it be known throughout all Cherokee territories that Sarah McKenna, called Galalahi Atsala, is under the protection of all Cherokee bands. Let any who would harm her know that they face not just one Cherokee village, but all Cherokee people. Let all who meet her know that she carries the authority and blessing of Cherokee law. The great cheer that rose from the assembled Cherokee people was unlike anything Sarah had ever heard. Nearly 200 voices raised in celebration, acknowledging her acceptance into a community that spanned multiple tribes and territories. She had achieved something unprecedented, formal recognition and protection from Cherokee people across a vast region of the Montana Territory. As the formal council concluded and celebration began, Sarah found herself surrounded by Cherokee leaders offering congratulations, advice, and invitations to visit their various communities during her season of learning. The path ahead would be challenging, but she had taken the first crucial step toward proving herself worthy of the unprecedented honor that had been bestowed upon her. Akando stood beside her throughout the congratulations, his pride evident in his expression. You did it, he said simply. You show them Cherokee heart. Now we begin real journey together. As the celebration continued into the night, Sarah reflected on the remarkable transformation her life had undergone. 3 days earlier, she had been a solitary settler hunting elk in the Montana wilderness. Now she was Galalahi Atsala, beloved firebearer, honorary member of multiple Cherokee bands, bound by sacred law to people who had become her family and her life's purpose. The rescue of Akando from the grizzly bear had been just the beginning. The real adventure, learning to live up to the trust and responsibility that Cherokee people had placed in her, was just beginning. Sarah knew that the months ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. But she also knew that she would face those challenges with the support and protection of an entire people who had chosen to accept her as one of their own. As the sacred fire burned bright against the Montana sky, Sarah understood that she had not just saved one young Cherokee brave from a grizzly bear. She had opened the door to a new kind of relationship between Cherokee and white people, a relationship based on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and the unbreakable bonds of honor and loyalty that now tied her forever to the Cherokee Nation.